Bartholomew Town.
Welcome into Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Remember, you can find every episode of the show wherever you get podcasts, whether that's Apple, Spotify, ripodcast.com, on WPRO Radio, and now on YouTube in video format. Just search for me, Bill Bartholomew, and you'll find some of our most recent episodes. And going forward, we'll be doing video basically for every episode. Okay, it's Inside Communications, presented by Half Street Group. Every month we go inside the details and some of the behind the scenes on impacting and driving meaningful conversations. Mike Raia does that as well as anybody and joins us each month to break down not only news of the day, but also some of the strategy behind it. Mike, thanks so much for your time as always.
Thanks for having me, Bill, and happy early Halloween.
Happy early Halloween. Yeah, we've got that orange sky over the weekend. You really know where you're at, especially with the temperature outside right now.
Oh, yeah.
We are here. Speaking of temperature, the temperature in the National Basketball Association is pretty hot right now. It is a bizarre situation, and it's one that potentially undermines the integrity of the league, at least in some cases, some games, which when you compare that with previous scandals in the NBA are all the more concerning given the absorption of sports books in and around professional sports leagues. There's just that much more of an issue when it comes to integrity. Basically, we're talking about, it's a major story, if you're not familiar, in some two simultaneous gambling-related rings that were busted up, if you will, by the FBI. This came out last week. A coach and two players involved, at least one player actively involved in this thing. And there's been a really, you want to call it a void. It took at least 36 hours before we heard from Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, and just a lot of questions about the whole entire situation as it pertains to the integrity of the league and, again, that gambling aspect. Mike, your observations initially on the communications rollout around this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost on it, and just to be a little bit glib, it's got the workings of a great multi-part podcast a year from now,
Right.
When we start to see more of this stuff come out in any of the investigations or any of the other reporting, the behind the scenes. But it is, to your point, this isn't the first rodeo that the NBA or college basketball or other big time sports have had around this. And I think it's just going to be, you're going to see a proliferation of it as sports betting and FanDuel and some of these other organizations and betting companies are getting more and more embroiled in the day-to-day operations and the day-to-day relationships of major sports. I also noticed it was very odd to me that it took Adam Silver as long as it did to be able to come out and address this investigation. And you want to make sure that you do these things right, that you don't jump out in front of something with limited information. I think they were truly caught off guard by it. And you want to make sure that you're not putting something out there that's going to create a false narrative or that you're going to defend somebody that you end up realizing is indefensible. But Silver is by and large over the last decade been probably the most competent and most transparent major sports commissioner. And I include in that big time NCAA, I include in that the international soccer. But when you look at the folks that are out there, and you've got the leadership of the PGA Tour that can't hold on to any credibility in the way that they say one thing about LIV and then go the other direction the minute that the Saudis offer them a little bit of money on it. You've got the way that Bettman comes out in the NHL and routinely just looks like he's the leader of the gang that can't shoot straight. And then you've got Major League Baseball that's threatening another work disruption, in large part because of incompetence at the level of the commissioner. But Silver has had this reputation as being the adult in the room, being the one that's able to grow his league in a way. And granted, those other leagues are growing. And you can look behind me. I'm the biggest baseball fan in Rhode Island. And I'm thrilled to be able to see the numbers that are turning out to watch the World Series. But for the last decade, Adam Silver has really been able to keep a temperature of what the conversations are about his league, what the conversations are about the big brands within his league. And to see him kind of sit on his hands for 3 days while this unfolded was a bit surprising. I do think that said, Since he's come out, I think that he has shown that he has an appreciation for how serious this is. The proof will be in the pudding, though, on this of is the NBA, because I think they're the ones that are most in the limelight right now of this intertwined relationship of big sports betting and big American sports. Is the NBA going to, and are they willing to stand up to FanDuel and Bally's and the others that are in the game and say, we need to reform what can or can't be bet on? We need to reform how we are going to maintain our credibility and our trust factor with our fans. And that's going to be something that I think is really interesting in how they roll that out on both a business perspective and a communications and PR rehabilitation. And do they go out and they say, you know what, if you want to continue to have a relationship with us, FanDuel, no more prop bets on individual player statistics, no more over under. You can only do the over, so that it's harder for players to be able to manipulate these things. That's going to be something that I think is going to be interesting. And it's going to be more than just a negotiation at the boardroom with those organizations. It's going to be, how do you engage your fans? How do you also engage those casual fans that have come in and started to follow some of these sports because of the proliferation of sports betting?
Right. I also wonder, from your standpoint, what role on a communications level do the sports books have? Obviously, if you look from state to state, it's really a market by market basis, which sports book, if a single one, if it's a multitude, whatever the case is, there's really no single voice when it comes to sports books right now. So when you have a disjointed environment, if there is to be a response, should there be something like a joint letter or joint statement, really reassuring not only the leagues themselves, but also, of course, the customer, those who are betting on sports?
Yep.
Have they been handling this well?
I think in some ways they rightly have been a little bit quiet on it, because it's not them. Like this scandal and this issue, this is illegal sports betting. This is not league. This is not people placing bets on FanDuel. This is not people placing bets on Bally's. Although that said, I believe that the legalization of this sports betting and the in-game marketing around it gives the opportunity for more of this to happen. I was listening to the Daily podcast this morning about it, where they had one of their New York Times sports reporters on there saying that the slippery slope around this new world that we're in 7 years after the Supreme Court case that allowed for sports gambling to come in is that you have players in lower tier leagues that are seeing an opportunity that they may be tempted by the payday that comes with it. You've got collegiate athletes who might not necessarily make their way into the professional lane, but they can be in a very not dissimilar to the 8 men that were kicked out of baseball in the 1919 scandal in baseball, with the exception of Shoeless Joe and one or two others. Most of them were players who were not superstars, who were not going to be able to make a full career on their talent alone. So I do think that there's opportunity for the legal sports betting entities to be able to put distance between what they do versus what happens with these kind of illegal gambling halls or illegal sports bets and sports books. And one of the things that they can probably put in there is the fact that they are regulated. They do have big data that's able to call out or able to identify when this kind of nefarious rigging or quote unquote inside trading may be happening, because they've got a bunch of other information that they can run it up against. And I do think that they are going to come more and more under the microscope as some of this progresses. Of, you may not have been involved directly, but there are these root causes around the thing flashing up on the TV screen of, do you think the Dodgers are going to score 4 runs in this inning? Odds are plus 1,100. Get your bets into FanDuel right now. Like, that's the type of thing that is giving the impression that these sports can be manufactured, or outcomes or deliveries can be manufactured. And they've got as much a responsibility to be able to restore trust to their customers who are making $15 bets, $50 bets, not the ones who are putting their mortgage on the line. The people who are participating in sports gambling because it's a second screen activity to do while they're watching something. And those people want to have trust that that $15 bet that they're putting down is a kosher $15 bet.
Yeah, big difference today in terms of the environment that we're operating in from the Black Sox scandal that you mentioned earlier. But one thing remains true, that integrity of competition is first and foremost in any athletic endeavor, any competitive endeavor, really. But when you start getting involved with customers on the outside, it's really important to make sure people are assured that they are betting on something that's valid.
Totally. And it's kind of jarring. I saw a thing over the week. I saw something on my Instagram feed over the weekend where it was a juxtaposition of the right field at, I want to say it was Fenway Park, but it might not have been. That the first image on the top was an image of the right fielder making a play near the wall, and on the second deck was a big thing saying no gambling. And then right beneath it was the same ballpark. It was another right fielder making a play, and it had a FanDuel ad or a Bally's ad or an MGM ad right there on the right field wall. It's like, this is how far we've come. And I get it because it's legal now. It's in all of these different states. There is an economy on it. The leagues need to embrace it. You can't ignore it. You can't put your head in the sand and both from an economic standpoint, there's dollars to be had there, but also from the standpoint of, they're going to be doing it anyway. You might as well be able to partner up so that you can control some of it. And I think that's ultimately what Adam Silver and what these legal sports books need to be able to prove. And I'd even say the other commissioners need to do it as well, because the NBA happens to be in this one. We're 2 years removed from Shohei Ohtani's trainer or translator getting in trouble, and the shortest Major League Baseball investigation of all time happening around whether or not Shohei was involved in that gambling scandal. So I think all of these sports leagues executives, from Charlie Baker up through Rob Manfred, are going to need to be able to have real thoughtful and real transparent conversations about what safeguards are they putting in place and how are they holding their legal sports gambling partners accountable to the fair sportsmanship and the fair gaming that they're purporting that they're putting out there.
Speaking of sports, here in our own backyard in Rhode Island, a bit of an interesting and also potentially disturbing, it seems actually very disturbing incident. I say potentially because now there's confusion as to what is actually happening and what did happen. That involves Smithfield High School and their football program, where a student who alleged that they were hazed, and that inclusive of that hazing was a series of anti-Semitic remarks, and that the student was locked in a locker and sprayed with Lysol. 5 football players were removed from the team, but then kind of quietly last week, they were reinstated. And the superintendent of Smithfield Public Schools put out a one-line statement, leaving a lot of people confused as to, one, if you have a zero tolerance policy and you found enough evidence to initially suspend the players, how in the world was that reversed? And the public on the whole saying, well, who do we believe? What happened here? It just created seemingly an unforced error. Your assessment of that as a kind of an interesting, like I said, interesting is maybe not the right word. It's interesting from a comm standpoint, but the facts at play, at minimum disturbing, very confusing situation. Your take?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first off, the allegations, I think are outrageous, and it's more than just disturbing. I think the just blatant anti-Semitism, the blatant disregard for any form of human empathy that came across, and granted, there's going to be additional information, I'm sure, that comes out on it. I don't pretend to know all aspects of it, but just on the surface, the details of what were described are things that we should never be talking about in 2025. And I think, unfortunately, the landscape that we're in, these kind of incidents and these kind of circumstances go reported far too, or are reported on far too often because they're happening far too often. And I think what Adam Greenman said about this earlier in the week, I think it was something along the lines of, this is the most blatant and most disturbing example of anti-Semitism that he's seen since he's been in his role at the Alliance, the Greater Providence or the Rhode Island Jewish Alliance. It's like, at its surface, like, that's the first and most important thing to be able to address. And that is how outrageous these actions were. Taking it a step back from there, I think the school district initially did the right thing in saying that they put these 5 players on suspension indefinitely. They said they had a 0 tolerance policy on it. And it was flabbergasting that they missed 1 game and then were reinstated. And I don't follow Smithfield high school football closely enough to know if these were players that were going to make a difference in the game or if they're in some kind of standing, but none of that should matter. If you tell the public that you have a 0 tolerance policy, you owe them more than a 1-sentence explanation for when you reverse that 0 tolerance policy. And potentially, maybe there is, and I'm going to put out. I think I'm reminded of, and I'm not making an apples to apples comparison in this, but the Duke lacrosse scandal a decade ago was one where as more and more facts came about, there was the need for the university to undo and reverse the discipline that it put forward. But they did that with a hell of a lot more than a 1-sentence media statement on a Friday afternoon as players were lining up after a 1-game suspension. And if the school district truly found that either the allegations were unfounded, and there's no evidence that I've seen of that, or that there was additional context to it, and I don't know how you put additional context to what those allegations are to be able to put it into a place of these are just boys being boys. And I'm just frankly so tired of hearing that kind of excuse given. The district owes people more on that. And the district is going to need to be able to go further in their explanation for why they reversed their policy to be able to claw back some of their credibility, some of their trust outside their immediate community there.
Yeah, something we'll keep an eye on for sure. Parents weighing in, or at least purported parents weighing in on the radio on WPRO on Friday afternoon. And we heard everything across the spectrum from this is entirely invented and made up to, nope, I know for sure this happened exactly the way it's been described. And the district is not doing anywhere near enough. So it's just something to keep an eye on.
And it's also, let me just say this on it too, like the allegations and the anti-Semitic nature of them are outrageous and horrifying. But hazing in and of itself should be a 0 tolerance offense in high schools and in colleges. We've seen so many stories of kids being bullied and the mental health, consequences of it. We see in college these organizations that do hazing and force kids to drink or force kids to do things that would be otherwise humiliating, and kids end up in the hospital at in some cases a best case scenario. There have been kids who've been killed because of some of this. Hazing in a high school by upperclassmen toward lowerclassmen or toward teammates to other teammates, regardless of any of the racial or prejudicial tones that go in, should be a 0 tolerance offense in schools. And that, to me, is something that all of these superintendents are going to need to be able to answer, or are going to have to be able to have some form of a public policy around. Now, it doesn't in any way take away from the anti-Semitic nature of the allegations and the actions that we're taking. And that is truly, truly deplorable and outrageous. But the hazing in and of itself should be a 0 tolerance offense.
Couldn't agree more. It's an outdated thing at minimum, and it should never have happened probably. And it's just one of those things that has become culturally acceptable. It's like a weird exception to the rule. And when you see anybody turn the other way on this, extremely disturbing. All right, let's move on. This is a great piece that you posted on September 24th at halfstreetgroup.com on your blog, which I recommend everybody check out. There's a lot of great information on there. And I love this title, first of all. And then when I read the article, I was like, oh, yeah, this makes so much sense. Why your PR should be more introverted. And PR, you think of it and you say, well, it's by design extroverted because you're trying to connect with a community. But there's a real argument there's actually several arguments in your piece. But one thing that really jumps to mind right out of the gate is that it's about the quality of the connections that you're making, the quality of the environment that you're operating in, and the quality of your ability to be at really dialed in when messaging, when engaging. Give us sort of the executive summary of this article and any themes that you want to touch on here that kind of resonate with that broader set of themes I just laid out.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for bringing this up. Like, this was one I'll in all candor, I wrote this after a 2 or 3 day stretch of a lot of extroverting that I had to do, and I'm able to put on the extrovert hat when I need to, but I am, like, every time I take one of those personality tests or the what is it, Briggs-Myers, whichever. It always comes out. Like, I'm a pretty, if the extrovert introvert line is here and introversion's on the left, I'm a center left introvert. And I get exhausted when I have to be out doing the schmoozing or the event circuit and that type of thing. So it kind of came out of just a cathartic exercise if I needed an hour to myself to be able to just refresh after being at a couple of these different events. And as I thought more and more about it, I realized that the kind of support that we offer to our clients is most impactful when we are taking a much more introverted approach, and when we are being more thoughtful about how our clients can fit their conversation or their point of view into discussions that are already happening in an authentic and in a additive manner, rather than a truly extroverted sense of PR and communications where you drop in and you try to force a conversation that's not happening, or you try to steer a conversation into and stay only in the areas of expertise or the areas of interest that you as a PR executive or you as a client are having. And what we find from that, and I think this is kind of what you were getting to, is the quality of coverage that we're able to get for our clients when we take more of that introverted, deeper conversations, smaller conversations. We get better news hits. We get higher quality placements in more strategic and more impactful news publications or organizations. We're not the firm. We've talked about this before. Like, there's a handful of agencies that we've competed with, not necessarily in Rhode Island, but some that have more of a regional or a national approach, that they sell their clients a SEO and a clip book and say, we're going to get you 150 clips. It's like, great. Like, that's fine. Like, but for every pay to play or immediate placement or algorithmic thing that's put up there, you're just kind of putting that out and it's not having any opportunity to be able to engage with the audience that you're looking to. Whereas the kind of approach that we take is we get to know what our clients want because we're able to have that one-on-one conversation that goes deeper than small talk. We're able to have that opportunity to be able to create relationships with reporters and editors over those individual conversations that we've been having with them for a decade. And instead of those 150 algorithmic placements onto websites that no one goes to, we're able to get the front page of the Providence Journal for our clients. We're able to get the op-ed in the Boston Globe and give them the opportunity to add value to conversations that have a deeper connection, which is that classic introvert extrovert. Like, I love being able to talk to people, but I want it in a small dose, or I want it in a smaller setting where we can go beyond the 1 inch or the half inch of what our knowledge base is and really get into having a deeper conversation and a deeper understanding of where we come from.
Energy is a resource. Influence is a result. In a media landscape built for noise, introverts play bring clarity, patience, and staying power. That's posted on a graphic that thematically comes from the piece. Rest, energy, it's not being lazy. It's actually the opposite. You even talk about playing golf as a part of your broader PR strategy. I identify with that completely. Why is it important to use and understand your own energy when it comes to making major decisions like this?
I mean, for me, it's when I spend too much time, and this is me personally, quote unquote extroverting. I get tired. I get it. It's an energy drain. I used to, when I worked in Governor Raimondo's office, we had a deputy chief of staff who was one of the smartest people I've ever worked with, one of the most energetic people I ever worked with, and like classic fit of an extrovert. And we worked really, really well together because we both knew what strengths we had. And we both knew how to be able to capture our energy. And I remember walking into his office one day. I had 2 meetings with him. I said, I'm canceling one of these. I get 1 meeting with you a day because I'm only going to be my best if I can be able to focus and be able to like match your energy for one. But then I will be able to take what we have from that meeting and go back into my office, put my headphones on, and put the whole comm strategy, put the whole messaging strategy together based on the energy that I spent there, because the restorative process for me is sitting down and doing that individualized work. Where that translates for the kind of PR engagement and the stuff that we do for our clients is that rest period is where you're able to find your real influence with the public narrative or the public the public discussion that you're trying to be a part of and trying to lead. Because if you go out and you try to get a headline in every hour of every newscast, you just end up becoming part of the noise. Whereas if you give yourself the opportunity to focus on those high quality placements, those strategic stories that get published, and you give them room to breathe, you give people the opportunity to be able to read or watch and reflect on it. You give your team the opportunity to be able to put that content out onto other platforms so that it reaches other audiences rather than going to chase the immediate next headline or the immediate next click so that you can go show a bunch of funders that I got 137 placements or I got 200 media mentions in on social media. It's like, who gives a shit? Maybe you can't use this on PRO now because I just said that. But it's like, what you really need in there is that opportunity for these things to be able to resonate and for these things to be able to connect with the people that you're trying to influence so that they can then take your messaging on and share it with their audiences. And if you're trying to take up so much space in the conversation or be that extra, like have the extroverted press strategy that seeks to push out anyone else that's able to compete with that conversation or with that with your stance in there, you're not having a conversation, you're blasting an advertisement. And right. People respond to the opportunity to be able to engage authentically, which is why we try to make sure that our strategies have more of that two-way back and forth.
Yeah. And then sort of the last major theme is that creates sustainability in an organic way, not a, I think sometimes about Phil Collins. I mean, we were both alive. We weren't necessarily consuming this in real time, but I read often about Phil Collins in the 1980s. He was so ubiquitous that it got to a point where even though the music was great and undeniable, nobody could stand it anymore because it was just in your ears on every radio format, everywhere you looked. And it kind of changed the public's perception of him. And he doesn't get mentioned in the same context as some of the other great artists from that time because it felt like every time you had an orthodontist appointment, you had to suffer through a Phil Collins song or two. So sometimes being way too in front of people, it creates, while it seems like this is moving the ball forward, it's actually anything but sustainable. That's a big takeaway I had from your article.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we wanted to be able to get across with it, or that I wanted to be able to share on it, is it's important to be respected and be seen as a leader in the conversations that you as an organization leader are credible on, that you have experience that is authentic and is easily understood. But if you put yourself into a place where you're going to say yes to like having the conversation about every little thing that even connects into it, you undermine that credibility. And there is a strategic need to allow others to be able to be a part of that conversation so that the conversation is able to be sustained. When you look at housing, I think that's a great example of this. There are so many different aspects to the housing story in Rhode Island that it requires a need for there to be multiple spokespeople or multiple perspectives that are included in there. And there's certainly organizations that could command the opportunity to be able to be in every single story about housing. I think Crossroads is one of those. But it does not make strategic sense for every single story or every single conversation or every single issue on it to have the Crossroads or the One Neighborhood Builders or the housing secretary be the only spokespeople on that, because it doesn't push the ball forward. It doesn't bring more people into the urgency of that conversation. And when you're doing the kind of social impact, public affairs type of PR and communications that we do at Half Street, at the end of the day, what we're showing our clients value on is not, you got this much engagement on your social media post. It's, you got this thing passed, and it means that shovels are going in the ground to build a new housing development. It means this many people have a bed to sleep in tonight because you were able to secure a major private philanthropic grant that's going to go into direct services. That's the kind of PR that we're doing. And for us to be able to show that impact, we need to be doing more than just self-promotion.
Mike Raia, founder and president at Half Street Group, halfstreetgroup.com. Highly recommend heading over there, not only for the blog, but if you're in need of any sort of messaging, PR, strategy development, not going to find anybody better than Mike Raia and the Half Street Group team. As always, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I'll talk to you next month.